I was checking my husband's Facebook messages when a notification popped up. Google wanted to know if I was interested in more searches about life insurance for spouses and payout for accidental death. My heart stopped. James had been searching for ways to cash in on my death. I stared at the screen, the blue light casting shadows across our bedroom, the same room where we'd whispered dreams to each other for 8 years. Just last night, he'd kissed my forehead before turning out the light. Now I wondered if he'd been calculating how much I was worth dead. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I closed the browser, hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the laptop. Sweat beaded along my hairline despite the chill of our apartment. The radiator knocked in the corner, the same steady rhythm that usually lulled me to sleep now sounding like a countdown. I glanced at the clock. James would be home in 3 hours. 3 hours to decide if I was being paranoid or if my husband was planning my murder. My phone buzzed. Olivia, my sister, calling for our weekly check-in. I almost declined, but her voice might anchor me to reality. Hey, I answered, trying to sound normal. Sophie? What's wrong? So much for sounding normal. Olivia had always read me like an open book, even through phone lines and across 3 states. Nothing, just work stress, I lied, then immediately crumbled. Actually, no. I found something on James's computer. What, like another woman? Olivia asked, her voice already hardening with protective anger. Worse, I whispered. Life insurance searches. Lots of them. And information about payouts for accidental deaths. The silence stretched between us, heavy with implications. Maybe it's innocent, Olivia finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. People look up weird stuff online all the time. He's been distant lately. Coming home late. Taking calls in the other room. Each small oddity I dismissed now lined up like evidence. Get out of there, Olivia's voice turned urgent. Pack a bag and come to my place. We'll figure it out together. I closed my eyes, trying to think. James and I had been together for 10 years, married for 8. We'd survived job losses, a miscarriage, his mother's death. He'd held me through night terrors and panic attacks. He knew all my fears, all my weaknesses. I can't just leave, I said, though I wasn't sure why. Pride maybe. Or disbelief. What if there's an explanation? What explanation could there possibly be for researching how to cash in on your death? Olivia snapped. I had no answer. But I also couldn't reconcile the James the first knew, the man who cried during dog rescue commercials, with someone calculating my worth and death benefits. I need to look around more, I said. See if there's anything else. Olivia sighed. If you won't leave, at least keep your phone on you. Call me if anything feels off. Promise me. I promise, I said, already opening a new browser window. If James was investigating me, I needed to investigate him back. I started with our bank accounts. Nothing unusual there, same deposits, same bills. Credit card statements showed normal purchases, groceries, gas, a birthday gift for his niece. No secret hotel rooms, no jewelry for another woman. I moved to his email, guilt gnawing at me even as fear drove me forward. Most were work-related, updates from his team at the architectural firm. Nothing suspicious, until I found a folder labeled personal. Inside were exchanges with a law firm specializing in estate planning. My stomach twisted. The most recent email mentioned finalizing documents and updated beneficiary information. James had never mentioned estate planning to me. Not once. I closed the email and sat back, mind racing. Maybe this wasn't about killing me. Maybe he was planning to leave me, setting up his finances before filing for divorce. The thought brought a different kind of pain, but at least it didn't involve my murder. Then another thought hit me. If he was checking my history the way I was checking his, he'd find something equally suspicious. Because 3 weeks ago, after another silent dinner and forced conversation, I'd searched for divorce attorneys in our area. I'd told myself it was just research, just keeping options open. But now those searches sat in my history like a confession. My phone buzzed again. James. A text message. Coming home early. We need to talk. For words that never preceded anything. Good. My hands went cold. Was this it? Was he coming home to confront me? To do worse? I called Olivia back. He's coming home early. Says we need to talk. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Get out now, she said immediately. I don't care if you're being paranoid. Better safe than sorry. But what if, Sophie Elizabeth, my sister's voice cut through my hesitation. Remember what Dad always said about trusting your gut? Your gut is screaming right now. Listen to it. Dad had been a police officer for 30 years before retiring. His advice on personal safety was practically gospel in our family. And he'd always emphasized that strange behavior plus secrecy equaled danger. Okay, I said, making a decision. I'll pack a bag. Tell him I'm visiting you for a few days. That gives me time to figure out what's really going on. Good, Olivia sounded relieved. Text me when you're on the road. I hung up and moved quickly, throwing clothes and toiletries into a duffel bag. As I reached for my laptop, another thought occurred to me. I opened a new tab and searched how to check if someone is tracking your phone. The results were unsettling. Spyware was easily available and could monitor everything from location to text messages. I couldn't risk it. I took out the second phone I used for work, a basic model with no apps or connection to my personal accounts. I texted Olivia from it, using work phone. Might be tracked on personal. Will call from road. Her reply came seconds later, smart. Be careful. I finished packing, grabbed my emergency cash from the back of my underwear drawer, and was heading for the door when I heard it, a key in the lock. James was home, much earlier than his text had implied. My heart slammed against my ribs. The apartment suddenly felt tiny, the walls closing in. I was caught, bag in hand, escape obvious. The door swung open, and there he was. My husband of 8 years looked tired, his dark hair rumpled like he'd been running his hands through it all day. His eyes went from my face to the bag and back again. Going somewhere, he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Olivia called. I said, the lie coming easily. She's having a rough time. Thought I'd drive down for a few days. Without telling me? His eyebrows rose. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I fought the urge to step back. I was going to call you from the road, I said. Your text came just as I was leaving. James nodded slowly, setting down his briefcase. He didn't take off his coat. Interesting timing. Why did you come home early? I asked, trying to shift the focus. He studied me for a long moment, then sighed. I think you know why, Sophie. My mouth went dry. I don't, actually. I saw your search history, he said flatly. Divorce attorneys? Really? Were you even going to talk to me before contacting them? Relief and a new kind of dread washed over me. So this was about my searches, not his plans for me. But now we were having a conversation I wasn't prepared for. It was just research, I said weakly. I wasn't actually planning to. Stop, he cut me off. Don't lie to me. Not after 10 years. I'm not lying, I insisted, even as guilt colored my cheeks. Things have been difficult lately. I was exploring options, that's all. Options, he repeated, the word bitter on his tongue. Like ending our marriage? That kind of option? You've been distant, I countered, finding my footing in righteous anger. Taking calls in other rooms. Coming home late. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to talk to me, he shot back. Like we always said we would, no matter what. Fine, I tightened my grip on my bag. Let's talk about your searches then. Life insurance? Accidental death payouts? What are those about, James? He blinked, genuinely surprised. You were checking my search history? You checked mine, I pointed out. Because you left your laptop open on the kitchen table, he said. I wasn't snooping. It was right there when I was making coffee. I had left my laptop open that morning, rushing to shower before a meeting. A rookie mistake. That doesn't explain the life insurance searches, I pressed. James ran a hand through his hair, confirming my earlier guess about his disheveled appearance. This isn't how I wanted to have this conversation. What conversation? My voice rose slightly. The one where you explain why you're calculating how much I'm worth dead. What? His face transformed from frustration to shock. Is that what you think? That I'm planning to, what, kill you for insurance money? Put so bluntly, it sounded absurd. But fear isn't rational. Why else would you be researching that stuff? I demanded. Because of my father. James exclaimed. My father, who dropped dead of a heart attack at 56 with no life insurance, leaving my mother with a mortgage she can barely afford. I've been helping her sort through the financial mess, and it made me realize we don't have our affairs in order either. I stared at him, processing this explanation. James's father had indeed died suddenly 3 months ago. The aftermath had been chaotic, with his mother calling at all hours, overwhelmed by paperwork and decisions. So the life insurance searches, I began, were for us. Both of us, James finished. I was looking into policies, trying to figure out what would make sense. The accidental death stuff came up in the research. I wasn't specifically searching for it. Relief weakened my knees. And the law firm emails? About estate planning? His eyes widened slightly. You went through my emails too? I thought you were planning to kill me. I defended myself. Jesus, Sophie. He looked genuinely hurt. After everything we've been through, you really think I could do that? Shame crept in, dulling the edge of my fear. But something still didn't add up. If this was all innocent, why didn't you just tell me about it? I asked. James hesitated, and I saw something flicker across his face. Discomfort. Guilt. Because I didn't want to worry you, he said finally. You've been stressed about the promotion, and things have been tense between us. I didn't want to bring up death and finances on top of everything else. It made sense, but something in his delivery felt off. James was holding something back. And the late nights? The private phone calls? I pressed. He looked away. Work. Stuff. The Westfield project is behind schedule. Another plausible explanation, but again, delivered with a slight hesitation that raised my hackles. So why did you need to talk today? I asked. Your text said we needed to talk. Because I found your searches for divorce lawyers, he said, exasperation creeping into his voice. I thought my wife was planning to leave me without even having the courtesy to discuss it first. We stood there in our entryway, duffel bag still clutched in my hand, mutual accusations hanging in the air between us. 10 years of trust, eroded by search histories and secrecy. Are you leaving me, Sophie? James asked, his voice quieter now, vulnerable. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I'd fallen in love with at 23, who'd stood beside me through every hardship, who knew how I took my coffee. And which side of the bed I preferred. If he said the life insurance searches were innocent, shouldn't I believe him? But the hesitation in his answers, the flicker of something hidden, that gave me pause. I don't know, I answered honestly. I don't want to. But something's changed between us, and I don't understand what it is. He nodded slowly. I feel it too. So what do we do? I asked. James took a deep breath. We could start by putting down the escape bag and having an actual conversation. Maybe with coffee. Or something stronger. It was a peace offering. A return to normalcy. Part of me wanted to accept it, to retreat to the familiar comfort of our routine. But another part, the part still vibrating with alarm, hesitated. I promised Olivia I'd come, I said. She's expecting me. Call her, James suggested. Tell her we're working things out. That you'll visit another time. I wavered, torn between flight and confrontation. I need to know everything, James. No more secrets. Whatever you're holding back, I need to hear it. Something shifted in his expression, resignation, perhaps. Or relief. Okay, he agreed. Everything on the table. But the same goes for you. I want to know why divorce was on your mind. I nodded, though my stomach knotted at the thought of articulating the slow disintegration of connection I'd been feeling. Some truths are harder to voice than others. I'll call Olivia, I decided, setting down my bag as a gesture of commitment to this conversation. James nodded and headed for the kitchen, shrugging off his coat. I'll make coffee. As I pulled out my phone, I noticed his shoulders were tense, his movements stiff. Whatever he was preparing to tell me, it wasn't going to be simple. And maybe, I realized with a chill, my instincts hadn't been entirely wrong. I texted Olivia, staying to talk things out. We'll call you later. Then added, if you don't hear from me by midnight, call me. Just in case. Because while I wanted to believe in the man I married, the man who made me laugh and held me through grief, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was still hidden. And in my experience, secrets rarely stayed buried forever. I joined James in the kitchen, where the coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the air with its comforting aroma. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. So, I said, taking a seat at our small kitchen table. Everything on the table. Where do we start? James poured 2 cups of coffee, adding, "Cream to mine the way I liked it." A small gesture of familiarity in an increasingly unfamiliar situation. "I think," he said carefully, setting the mug before me, "we start with why my wife was looking up divorce attorneys 3 weeks ago." And so began the longest conversation of our marriage, one that would unravel the careful fabrications we'd both been constructing, thread by thread, until the truth lay exposed between us, more complicated and painful than either of us had imagined. I wrapped my hands around the warm coffee mug, trying to find the right words. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence between us. "Things haven't felt right for months," I finally said. "You're physically here, but mentally somewhere else." We stopped talking about anything meaningful. Just logistics and schedules. It felt like living with a roommate, not a husband. James nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on his coffee. "I noticed that too. But you didn't say anything," I pointed out, a hint of accusation in my voice. "Neither did you," he countered. "Until you started researching divorce lawyers." "I wasn't planning to file," I clarified. "I was just exploring options. Trying to understand what it would mean if things didn't improve." "That's exactly what scares me," James said, looking up at me now. "That you'd consider ending our marriage without even trying to fix it first." "What was there to fix?" I asked, frustration seeping into my voice. "You weren't letting me in. Every time I tried to talk about us, you changed the subject or suddenly had work to do." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd always found endearing. Now it just highlighted his discomfort. "I know," he admitted. "I've been distracted." "By what?" I pressed. "What's so important that you couldn't share it with me?" James took a deep breath, then another. "There's something I've been dealing with. Something I didn't know how to tell you." My heart raced. Here it was, the confession. Another woman? Gambling debts? A health diagnosis? "I lost my job," he said finally. 3 months ago." I blinked, processing. "What?" "I was let go. Budget cuts. The Westfield project was my last official assignment, but I've been freelancing to finish it." "You've been unemployed for 3 months and didn't tell me?" I couldn't wrap my head around it. "Where have you been going every day?" "Coffee shops. The library. Sometimes just driving around," he admitted, shame evident in his slumped shoulders. "I've been applying for positions, networking, trying to find something new. But it's been harder than I expected." "That's why you've been taking private calls," I realized. "Job interviews." He nodded. "And the late nights were me freelancing, trying to bring in some income." "I didn't want you to worry." Relief and anger warred within me. No affair, no murder plot, just a husband too proud to admit he'd been laid off. "Is that also why you were looking into life insurance?" I asked, connecting the dots. "Because we lost your coverage through work?" "Partly," he confirmed. "But also because of Dad. Seeing Mom struggle financially after his death, it got me thinking about what would happen to you if something happened to me. Especially now, with my job situation." The pieces were falling into place, but one still didn't fit. "Why keep this from me, James? We're partners. We're supposed to face challenges together." He looked away, his jaw tight. "You were up for that promotion. The one you've been working toward for years. I didn't want my failure to distract you or bring you down." "That's not your decision to make," I said, anger winning out. "You lied to me. Every day for 3 months, you walked out that door pretending everything was normal." "I was trying to protect you," he insisted. "No," I shook my head firmly. "You were protecting yourself. Your pride. Not me." James winced, but didn't argue. The point. He knew I was right. "And the estate planning emails?" I asked. "How does that fit in?" He hesitated again, and I sensed we still hadn't reached full disclosure. "James," I said, my voice hardening. "Everything on the table, remember?" He nodded, resignation in his eyes. After Dad died, I realized how unprepared we were for something like that. No wills, no advance directives, nothing. So I started looking into it. And I discovered that my company stock options, the ones we were counting on for our future, expired when I was let go. I lost them all. I sat back, stunned. Those options represented our dream home fund, our eventual early retirement plan. We'd made so many decisions based on their promised value. So the estate planning was damage control, I surmised. Trying to figure out what assets we still had. Yes, he confirmed. And setting up wills, just in case. The lawyer recommended life insurance policies for both of us as part of the overall plan. I processed this information, trying to reconcile my fears from earlier with this new reality. My husband wasn't plotting my murder, he was trying to rebuild our financial safety net without alarming me. Why didn't you just tell me all this when it happened? I asked, the question at the heart of our problem. James stared into his coffee, now gone cold. Because I was ashamed. You married a successful architect, not an unemployed middle-aged man sending out resumes that never get responses. I married you, I corrected him. Not your job title. Not your income. That's easy to say, he replied, a hint of bitterness in his tone. But would you have searched for divorce lawyers if you'd known the truth? If you'd known I was struggling, not just being distant? The question hung between us, uncomfortable in its honesty. Would knowing have changed my reaction? Or would financial stress have pushed me toward the same conclusion through a different path? I don't know, I admitted. But I deserved the chance to find out. To make that choice with all the information. James nodded slowly. You're right. I should have told you. Silence settled over us again, less tense than before but weighted with revelations. So where does this leave us? I finally asked. That depends, James said, looking directly at me now. On whether my deception is something you can forgive. And whether there's anything else you haven't told me. I shifted in my seat. It was my turn for honesty now. The promotion I was working toward, I began. I didn't get it. James frowned. But the celebration dinner last month. You said you were being recognized for your contributions. I clarified. With a plaque and a small bonus. Not the director position I'd been promised. When did you find out? 2 months ago, I admitted. Right around when you started acting strange. I thought maybe you were pulling away because you were disappointed in me. Understanding dawned in his eyes. So while I was hiding my job loss, I was hiding my professional setback, I finished. For pretty much the same reasons. Pride. Shame. We're quite a pair, aren't we? James said, with a hint of the dry humor I'd always loved about him. A small smile tugged at my lips despite everything. Apparently. What else? He pressed. If we're clearing the air, let's clear all of it. I took a deep breath. I've been thinking about a career change. Something completely different from corporate marketing. Maybe teaching, or nonprofit work. Since when? He seemed genuinely surprised. Since watching my boss take credit for my ideas for the 3rd time, I said. Since realizing I don't want his job anymore, even if they offered it to me tomorrow. You never mentioned this. Because it felt selfish, I explained. Throwing away a stable career for some idealistic dream. Especially with the mortgage, and our plans for the future. Plans based on my stock options that no longer exist, James pointed out wryly. Exactly. Everything we've been working toward suddenly seems built on shifting sand. James reached across the table, offering his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I took it. His palm was warm against mine, familiar in a way that transcended our current estrangement. We've both been keeping secrets, he acknowledged. Trying to maintain some image of success, of having it all together. And instead, we've never been further apart, I said softly. So what now? He asked again. I considered the question seriously. The man across from me had lied, yes. But not to hurt me, to protect me from truths he found shameful. And hadn't I done the same? We'd both been trapped in expectations, in the personas we thought we needed to maintain. Now, I said slowly, we start over. With honesty this time. No matter how uncomfortable. What does that look like? James asked, a cautious hope in his voice. It means I call Olivia and tell her I'm staying home tonight, I began. It means we sit down and look at our finances together, figure out where we stand without the stock options. Make new plans based on reality, not what we wish was true. And what about us? He pressed. The divorce lawyers? I wasn't ready to give up, I admitted. I was just scared. Scared of the distance between us, scared it meant something irreparable. I'm scared too, James confessed, squeezing my hand. Terrified, actually. Of failing. Of disappointing you. Of losing everything we've built. His vulnerability, so rarely displayed, touched something deep within me. This was the man I'd fallen in love with, not the polished professional facade, but the human being underneath, with all his fears and flaws. I think, I said carefully, that we need to redefine what success means for us. Maybe it's not the big house or early retirement. Maybe it's just being honest with each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. James nodded, relief visible in the softening of his features. I can do that. I want to do that. Me too, I said, and meant it. We spent the next hours talking more openly than we had in years. About money, yes, but also about dreams and disappointments, fears and hopes. We pulled out our laptops, looked at our financial situation together, the savings we still had, the debts we were carrying, the realistic timeline for James finding new employment. It wasn't pretty. Without his income, we were draining our emergency fund. The mortgage felt heavier now, our lifestyle suddenly precarious. But facing it together made it less overwhelming. We might need to downsize, James acknowledged, looking around our apartment with its high ceilings and city views. Or I could take on freelance work while job hunting, I suggested. My skills are marketable even outside traditional corporate roles. We'll figure it out, he said, and for the first time in months, I believed him. As evening fell, we ordered takeout and continued our marathon of honesty. I called Olivia to let her know I was safe, that James and I were working through things. She was skeptical but supportive, making me promise to keep her updated. I still can't believe you thought I was planning to murder you, James said later, as we cleared away the empty containers. In my defense, your search history was pretty suspicious, I pointed out. And you were acting strange. Note to self. Searching for life insurance while behaving secretively sends the wrong message to one's spouse, he quipped. I laughed, the sound surprising me with its authenticity. When was the last time we joked together? The last time tension hadn't underscored every interaction? What about you? James asked, more serious now. Are you really thinking about leaving corporate life? I nodded, feeling a weight lift as I acknowledged it aloud. I've been miserable there for years. Just going through the motions, chasing promotions I'm not even sure I want anymore. What would you do instead? I've been researching programs that bring marketing professionals into schools, I admitted. Teaching business and communication skills to high school students. It's a pay cut, but the idea of making a real difference. You'd be amazing at that, James said, and the simple sincerity in his voice brought tears to my eyes. You think so? I know so. You've always been at your best when helping others see their potential. His support, offered without hesitation despite our precarious situation, touched me deeply. This was the partnership I'd been missing, the sense that we were on the same team, facing challenges together rather than as adversaries. Later that night, lying in bed with a foot of careful space between us, I found myself reflecting on how quickly certainty can dissolve. That morning, I'd been convinced my husband was plotting my death. Now I understood he was simply a proud man trying to protect his wife from his perceived failures. James? I whispered into the darkness. His voice was drowsy but attentive. When did we stop talking to each other? Really talking, I mean. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he sighed. I think it happened gradually. Small omissions that became bigger ones. Conversations postponed. Until they were forgotten. Until we were living parallel lives instead of shared ones, I added. Yes, he agreed. And the more separate we became, the harder it seemed to bridge the gap. It's strange, I mused. How you can sleep next to someone every night and still feel alone. James shifted, turning to face me though I could barely make out his features. In the dim light. I don't want to live like that anymore. Separate. Disconnected. Me neither, I said softly. His hand found mine under the covers, a tentative touch. Sophie, I'm sorry. For shutting you out. For not trusting you with the truth. I'm sorry too, I replied, squeezing his fingers. For assuming the worst instead of asking direct questions. For looking up divorce attorneys instead of fighting. For us. Are we going to be okay? He asked, vulnerability raw in his voice. The question hung between us, impossible to answer with certainty. The future was suddenly uncharted territory, financially, professionally, emotionally. All our careful plans had evaporated, leaving us to navigate by instinct rather than design. I don't know, I answered honestly. But I think we have a better chance now than we did yesterday. With the truth on the table, at least we're facing the same reality. James nodded, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. One day at a time? One honest day at a time, I agreed. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that while many questions remained unanswered, the most immediate ones had been resolved. My husband wasn't planning my murder. I wasn't secretly planning to leave him. We were just two imperfect people who'd lost their way in the maze of expectations and assumed roles. Tomorrow would bring practical challenges, budget discussions, job search strategies, difficult decisions about our future. But tonight, something fundamental had shifted. The wall between us had cracked, letting in light where before there had been only shadows and assumptions. Whether that light would be enough to rebuild what we'd lost remained to be seen. But for the first time in months, possibility flickered between us, fragile but real. And sometimes, I thought as sleep finally claimed me, possibility is enough to start with. Morning arrived with soft gray light filtering through our bedroom blinds. I woke to find James already up, the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, I could almost pretend it was a normal day, that our world hadn't shifted on its axis last night. Then reality settled back in, heavy but somehow less threatening in the light of day. I found James at the kitchen table, laptop open. A notebook filled with his precise handwriting beside it. He looked up when I entered, offering a tentative smile. "I made coffee," he said, gesturing to the full pot. "And I've been working on something." I poured myself a cup and joined him at the table. "What is it?" "A financial plan," he explained, turning the notebook so I could see. 3 scenarios: best case, where I find a comparable position within 2 months, middle case, 6 months of job searching with some freelance work, and worst case. Worst case? I prompted when he hesitated. Worst case, I don't find another architectural position and have to consider a career change too, he finished. Each scenario shows how long our savings would last, what expenses we could cut, what decisions we'd need to make and when. I studied the careful columns of numbers, impressed despite my lingering hurt. This was James in his element, methodical, practical, turning chaos into manageable steps. "This is good," I acknowledged. "Really good. It's just a starting point," he said. "I wanted you to see that even in the worst case, we have options. We're not destitute. We just need to make adjustments." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee to hide the sudden tightness in my throat. His words carried an unspoken message: we can survive this. We have a future, even if it's not the one we planned. "I have an interview tomorrow," he added, almost casually. "Small firm, doing mostly residential work. Less prestigious than Landmark, but they're stable. Family-owned." "That's great," I said, genuinely pleased. "Why didn't you mention it last night?" "Honestly? I was afraid to jinx it," he admitted with a sheepish smile. "I've had 5 interviews in the past 3 months, and nothing panned out. But this one feels different." The principal architect and I clicked. "Tell me about the firm," I encouraged, watching his animation return to his features, the passion that had first attracted me to him. As James described the interview and the projects the firm handled, I realized something important: his unemployment hadn't just been a financial blow, but an identity crisis. Architecture wasn't just his job, it was his calling, his way of shaping the world. Being cut off from that had hollowed him out in ways I hadn't fully appreciated. "What about you?" he asked, after exhausting the topic of his prospective employer. "Any plans for today?" "I need to email my boss," I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke. "Request a meeting to discuss my role and future at the company." "Are you going to tell him you're considering leaving?" I shook my head. "Not yet. First, I want to understand why I was passed over for the promotion. What skills they think I'm lacking. If there's a path forward that makes sense. And if there isn't?" James asked gently. "Then I'll start researching those teaching programs." More seriously, I said, feeling a small thrill at saying it aloud. "Maybe take some night classes to get certified while still working full-time." James reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Whatever you decide, I support you. 100%. The simple affirmation, offered without qualification despite our financial uncertainty, moved me deeply. This was the partnership I'd been missing, mutual support even when the path forward wasn't clear. "We should probably tell our families what's going on," I suggested, thinking of Olivia's concern. "At least the basics." James winced. "My mother will panic. She's already struggling with Dad's death and her own financial situation." "We don't have to share everything," I conceded. Just enough that they understand if we need to make lifestyle changes. No more expensive dinner parties or weekend trips for a while. He nodded reluctantly. You're right. Transparency isn't just for us, it affects everyone in our circle. We spent the morning making calls, first to Olivia, who was relieved to hear the truth behind James's suspicious searches, then to his sister Leah, who offered contacts at several firms that might be hiring. We kept the conversations factual and forward-looking, emphasizing our plan rather than our fear. After lunch, I drafted an email to my boss requesting a meeting, careful to frame it as a career development discussion rather than a confrontation. As I clicked send, a weight lifted from my shoulders. No matter the outcome, I was taking control of my professional life again, not just drifting along the path of least resistance. I've been thinking, James said as we cleaned up the lunch dishes. Maybe this forced reset isn't entirely bad. I raised an eyebrow. Explain. We've been on autopilot for years, he said, carefully placing a plate in the dishwasher. Working toward goals we set in our 20s without stopping to ask if they still fit who we are now. The big house in the suburbs, I mused. Early. Retirement at 55. Exactly. But what if those aren't the right goals anymore? What if there's something better for us, something we couldn't see because we were so focused on the plan? His words resonated more than I expected. How long had I been unhappy at work, pushing through each day on autopilot? How many times had we discussed future plans that felt more obligatory than inspiring? Like what? I asked, curious about where his thoughts were leading. I don't know yet, he admitted. But I've been thinking about Dad a lot. How he spent 40 years at a job he tolerated, waiting for a retirement that came too late. I don't want that to be us. The conversation was interrupted by James's phone ringing, the small firm calling to move his interview up to that afternoon. As he hurried to shower and change, I found myself contemplating his words. What if this crisis was actually an opportunity? A forced pause that allowed us to reevaluate everything? I opened my laptop and, on impulse, created a new document titled, What Matters Now? At the top, I typed a simple question: if money were no object, how would we spend our lives? It was a thought exercise we'd done years ago, in the early days of our relationship when possibilities seemed endless. Back then, our answers had been grand and somewhat generic: travel the world, buy a beach house, start a foundation. But now, with the prospect of genuine financial constraints looming, the question felt more urgent, more revealing. I was still staring at the blank document when James emerged, dressed in his interview suit, hair neatly combed. How do I look? He asked, straightening his tie. Impressive, I said honestly. The suit highlighted his broad shoulders, the gray at his temples adding distinction rather than age. They'd be lucky to have you. He smiled, some of his old confidence returning. I've updated my portfolio to emphasize residential projects. And I've been researching their previous work so I can speak specifically to how my skills complement their style. Smart, I nodded. When will you be back? Probably around 4, unless it goes really well and they want to introduce me to more of the team. He hesitated, then stepped closer, dropping a kiss on my forehead. Wish me luck? All the luck, I said, squeezing his hand. You've got this. After he left, the apartment felt strangely empty. Without work to distract me, without the immediate crisis of suspected murder plots to manage, I was left with my thoughts and the blank document on my screen. If money were no object, how would we spend our lives? I began typing, not censoring or analyzing, just letting the thoughts flow. I would teach not just marketing, but how to find your voice, how to tell stories that matter. I would write the novel I've been outlining in my head for years. We would live somewhere with more space, not necessarily bigger, but with room to breathe. A garden. Trees. James would design spaces that heal, that bring communities together. We would host dinners where people from different backgrounds could connect. We would travel, but slowly, immersively, not just checking destinations off a list. We would volunteer, using our skills to help others find theirs. I stopped, surprised by the clarity of the vision emerging on the page. None of it required wealth, not really. It required intention, courage, a willingness to step off the established path. My phone buzzed with a text from my boss, available at 3 p.m. to discuss your email. My office. Sooner than expected, but good. No time to overthink it. I responded with a simple confirmation, then closed the laptop, leaving my half-formed vision saved but incomplete. As I prepared for the meeting, selecting a professional outfit that projected confidence without arrogance, I found myself approaching the conversation differently than I would have just days ago. Instead of entering with resentment about the missed promotion, I was genuinely curious. What did they see, or not see, in me? What could I learn from this setback? The office was quieter than usual for a weekday afternoon. I nodded to colleagues as I passed, wondering if they knew I'd been passed over, if they'd speculated about my reaction. The thought bothered me less than it would have before. My boss, Richard, greeted me with his usual efficiency, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Thanks for making time," I said, settling into the seat. "I appreciate the prompt response." "Your email caught my attention," he replied, leaning back slightly. "You've never been one to request career discussions. Usually just forge ahead on your own path." The observation surprised me. Was that how I was perceived? As someone who didn't seek guidance or feedback? "I've been reflecting on the director decision," I said, deciding directness was the best approach. "I'd like to understand where I fell short, what skills or experiences I need to develop to be considered for similar roles in the future." Richard studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You didn't fall short, Sophie. Your work has consistently exceeded expectations." "Then why?" I began, confusion evident in my voice. "The position went to Melissa because she specifically asked for it," he interrupted. 6 months ago, she came to me with a detailed presentation on why she was ready for the role, what unique perspective she would bring, and how she planned to grow the department. I blinked, processing this information. I didn't know the position was open for discussion 6 months ago. "It wasn't officially posted until later," Richard acknowledged. "But Melissa created the opportunity by making her case early and thoroughly. She didn't wait to be invited to the table, she pulled up a chair." The implication was clear, and it stung. While I'd been working diligently, expecting my contributions to speak for themselves, Melissa had been actively advocating for her advancement. The realization shifted something fundamental in my understanding of workplace dynamics. "I see," I said finally. "That's actually helpful to know." "You're exceptional at execution, Sophie," Richard continued. "When given a direction, you exceed expectations every time. But leadership isn't just about execution, it's about vision, about seeing possibilities others don't and making the case for them." His assessment echoed uncomfortable truths I'd been avoiding. How often had I complained to James about decisions made without my input, while never actively offering that input unprompted? How many times had I fulfilled assignments perfectly, while harboring private reservations about their strategic value? "Thank you for the candor," I said, genuinely appreciative despite the discomfort. "It gives me something concrete to work on." Richard leaned forward slightly. "Is that all you wanted to discuss? Your email hinted at broader questions about your role here." I hesitated, weighing honesty against prudence in our current financial situation. The safe move would be to retreat, to focus on improving my prospects within the company. But James's words echoed in my mind, about not wanting to follow his father's path of tolerating a job for decades while waiting for retirement. "Actually," I said, taking a deep breath, "I've been considering whether corporate marketing is still the right fit for my skills and interests." Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. "This is new. What alternatives are you exploring?" "Teaching," I admitted. "Bringing real-world marketing experience into educational settings. Helping young people develop practical communication skills before they enter the workforce." To my surprise, Richard didn't dismiss the idea. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "You would excel at that. Your ability to break complex concepts into accessible components is remarkable." His validation, offered without hesitation, bolstered my confidence. It would be a significant change. And honestly, I'm not ready to make that leap immediately. But I wanted to be transparent about my thinking. "I appreciate that," Richard said. "And I'd like to propose a middle path, if you're open to it." "I'm listening." "Our college outreach program has been understaffed since Jensen left. We've been looking for someone to revamp it, develop workshop content, serve as a guest lecturer, identify internship candidates. It would be in addition to your current responsibilities, with a stipend rather than a full salary adjustment. But it would give you a chance to test whether teaching resonates as much in practice as it does in theory." The offer took me by surprise. It wasn't a promotion or a raise, but it was an opportunity to explore my interest without making a drastic change. A bridge rather than a leap. That sounds ideal, actually, I said, not bothering to hide my enthusiasm. When would this start? The spring semester begins in January, Richard replied. We'd need program materials finalized by early December. Is that timeline feasible for you? Absolutely, I confirmed, already mentally rearranging priorities to accommodate the new project. As we wrapped up the meeting, discussing next steps and expectations, I found myself energized in a way I hadn't been about work in months, possibly years. Not because I'd received a promotion or recognition, but because I'd advocated for a different path and found unexpected support. Walking back to my desk, I checked my phone and found a text from James. Interview ran long, good sign. They want me to come back tomorrow to meet the whole team. How did your meeting go? I smiled, typing back, surprisingly well. Tell you everything tonight. So proud of you. The rest of the afternoon passed in a productive blur. I tackled long postponed tasks with renewed focus, cleaned out my email inbox, and even initiated conversations with 2 colleagues about projects I'd been hesitant to propose. By the time I left the office, I felt lighter, more purposeful than I had in months. James was already home when I arrived, a bottle of wine open on the counter, not our usual expensive vintage, but a modest selection from the local shop. I know we should be cutting expenses, he said, offering me a glass, but I thought we could celebrate small victories. Definitely, I agreed, accepting the wine and clinking glasses with him. Tell me everything about the interview. As James described the meeting, the projects they discussed, the team dynamics, the possibility of bringing his sustainable design expertise to their residential focus, his entire demeanor transformed. The man before me was engaged, passionate, present in a way he hadn't been in months. They're offering less than I made at Landmark, he admitted when he got to the preliminary salary discussion. About 20% less. But the hours would be more reasonable, and there's profit sharing after the first year. How do you feel about that? I asked, curious about his perspective after our financial planning that morning. Honestly? I'm relieved they want me at all, he said. After 3 months of rejections, having a team excited about my portfolio, it matters more than the number. I nodded, understanding completely. The college outreach program Richard offered me comes with a stipend, not a raise. But the opportunity to test whether teaching is really what I want, that's worth more right now. We moved to the living room, carrying our wine and the simple pasta James had prepared. As we ate, we shared more details of our respective days, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in months. I started something today, I said during a lull. A thought exercise. What matters now? Tell me, James encouraged. I described the document, the question at its heart, and the beginnings of my answer. I didn't finish. But it got me thinking about whether this forced reset might actually be a gift in disguise. A chance to realign our lives with what truly matters to us now, not what mattered to us a decade ago. James was quiet for a moment, contemplative. I had a similar thought today, driving to the interview. About how I've been chasing prestige projects, working 80-hour weeks to impress people I don't even respect. For what? So we could buy a bigger house we'd hardly spend time in? Exactly. I said, feeling a surge of connection. What if we used this moment to make intentional choices, not just reactive ones? What would that look like? He asked, leaning forward, genuinely curious. I'm not entirely sure yet, I admitted. But I think it starts with being honest about what brings us joy, what gives our lives meaning. And then making choices that align with those priorities, even if they don't fit the traditional markers of success. James nodded slowly. I've been thinking about my dad again. About his regrets. He told me once, near the end, that he wished he'd designed more spaces where people could truly live, not just buildings that looked impressive in a portfolio. What would that mean for you? I asked. Maybe focusing on homes that nurture the families inside them. Community spaces that bring people together. Projects with purpose beyond aesthetics. His eyes lit up as he spoke, revealing a passion I hadn't seen in years. That sounds meaningful, I said softly. And aligned with who you are, not just what you do. What about you? He asked. Beyond teaching, what brings you joy? The question was simple but profound. When was the last time either of us had asked the other about joy, not just accomplishments or logistics? Writing, I said after a moment. Not marketing copy or press releases, but stories. Connecting with people through words. Creating spaces where ideas can breathe. As we continued talking, sketching out possibilities for a life redesigned around meaning rather than materialism, I felt something shift between us, a deepening, a remembering of what had drawn us together in the first place. Not our career trajectories or financial prospects, but a shared desire to create something meaningful with our lives. Later, as we cleared the dishes together, James paused, resting his hands on the counter. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on us. For being willing to have the hard conversations. For seeing possibilities where I could only see failure." I moved closer, placing my hand over his. "We're not out of the woods yet. There are still tough decisions ahead, sacrifices to make." "I know," he acknowledged. "But for the first time in months, I feel like we're facing them together, not as adversaries." "Partners," I said, the word carrying new weight after all we'd revealed and discovered. "Partners," he echoed, turning his hand to intertwine his fingers with mine. As we stood there in our kitchen, dishes half cleared, wine glasses empty, I felt a certainty that had been missing for too long. Whatever challenges lay ahead, financial, professional, personal, we would face them with honesty, with intention, and with a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. Not the house we lived in or the titles on our business cards, but the life we built together, day by honest day. 3 months passed with the steady rhythm of days filling with new purpose. The apartment that had once felt like a waiting room, a temporary space between achievements, now buzzed with the energy of transformation. Our dining table, once reserved for occasional dinner parties, had become command central, one end covered with James's architectural sketches, the other with my outlines for college workshops. I smiled as I watched James on the phone, his voice animated as he discussed modifications to a design with a client. The small architectural firm had offered him a position the day after his second interview, and though the salary was indeed lower than his previous job, the work energized him in ways Landmark never had. "Yes, Mrs. Chen, that's exactly right," he was saying, pencil moving across his sketch pad. "The southern exposure will maximize natural light while the extended eave prevents overheating in summer. Your utility bills should drop by 30%. His focus on sustainable, practical homes for real families had become his signature at the firm. His boss had already given him increasing responsibility, impressed by his combination of technical skill and client communication. My own professional shift had been equally rewarding. The college outreach program had expanded beyond our initial expectations, with 3 local universities now requesting workshops. What had begun as a side project with a modest stipend was evolving into a potential department of its own. Just yesterday, Richard had called me into his office to discuss formalizing the program. "The feedback from professors and students has been exceptional," he'd said, sliding a folder across his desk. "We've received inquiries from 6 more schools about implementing similar programs." Inside the folder was a proposal, creating a dedicated educational outreach division with me as its director. The salary would be comparable to my current position, but with more autonomy and a focus on the work that had rekindled my passion. "Take the weekend to think about it," Richard had suggested. "This would mean stepping away from your marketing responsibilities entirely. It's a different path." Different indeed, but aligned with the vision I'd begun sketching that day in the "What Matters Now" document, which had evolved from a thought exercise into a kind of mission statement for our lives. James ended his call and looked up, catching me watching him. "Mrs. Chen loves the modifications," he said, grinning. "Says it's exactly what she envisioned but couldn't articulate." "That's your superpower," I replied, joining him at his end of the table. "Hearing what people need, not just what they say they want." He laughed, wrapping an arm around my waist as I stood beside his chair. "Speaking of what people need, are we still on for dinner with Olivia and Mark tonight?" "Absolutely." I promised her we'd finally see their new place. I glanced at my watch. "We should leave in about an hour." James nodded, gathering his sketches into a neat portfolio. "Just enough time to clean up and change." As we prepared for the evening, moving around each other with the easy choreography of a couple who had rediscovered their rhythm, I reflected on how much had changed in 3 months. Not just professionally, but between us. The night I discovered James's search history felt like a lifetime ago, though the memory still carried an echo of that primal fear. We'd talked about it several times since, sometimes laughing at the absurdity, sometimes acknowledging the deeper truths it had forced to the surface. "You know what I'm most grateful for?" James asked as we walked to the car, the spring evening. Pleasant enough that we could have walked to Olivia's, but we're running too late. What's that? I linked my arm through his, enjoying the solid warmth of him beside me. That you were paranoid enough to snoop through my search history, he said with a teasing smile. Otherwise we might still be living separate lives under the same roof. I prefer to think of it as having finely tuned survival instincts, I countered, bumping his shoulder playfully. Either way, he said, voice turning serious, it forced us to confront what wasn't working. To be honest with each other and ourselves. I nodded, thinking of the painful conversations that had followed that night, but also the healing they had enabled. From suspecting murder to rediscovering partnership. Not the journey I expected, but I'll take it. Olivia and Mark's new home was a charming townhouse in a developing neighborhood, modest but thoughtfully designed. As Olivia gave us the tour, I noticed how she kept looking at me, searching for signs of envy or judgment. It's perfect for you, I said sincerely, admiring the small garden patio where Mark was setting up drinks. I love how the kitchen opens to the outdoor space. It's smaller than your place, Olivia pointed out, a question in her voice. Size isn't everything, I replied with a smile. It's how the space works for your life that matters. My sister studied me for a moment, then shook her head slightly. You really have changed, sophomore. 3 months ago you were climbing the corporate ladder and house hunting in lakeside estates. Priorities shift, I said simply. Sometimes by choice, sometimes by necessity. And sometimes by discovering your husband's search history, she added wryly. I laughed, the sound echoing in the cozy kitchen. That too. Over dinner, the conversation flowed easily between the four of us. James and Mark discussing woodworking techniques for the built-in bookshelves Mark was planning, Olivia and I catching up on family news. It wasn't until dessert that Olivia broached the subject I'd been waiting for. So, she said, refilling our wine glasses, are you going to tell me what's in that envelope you brought? You've been glancing at your bag all evening. I exchanged a look with James, who nodded encouragingly. Actually, we have news to share. Reaching for my bag, I pulled out the folder Richard had given me. I've been offered a new position at work. Director of Educational Outreach. Sophie, that's wonderful. Olivia exclaimed. The promotion you wanted. Not the one I thought I wanted, I clarified. Something better. Building bridges between corporate expertise and education, creating programs that help students develop practical skills. The workshops you've been developing? Mark asked. Olivia mentioned those were going well. Beyond expectations, I confirmed. And it's just the beginning. We're expanding to community colleges next semester, focusing on first-generation students and career changers. I'm so proud of you, Olivia said, raising her glass. To new directions. We clinked glasses, but I wasn't finished. There's more, actually. I pulled out a second envelope. James? He took it from me, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. We've also made a decision about our living situation. You're moving? Olivia asked, surprise evident in her voice. We are, James confirmed, opening the envelope and sliding out several sketches. We're downsizing from the apartment and using the difference to purchase this. The sketches showed a modest structure nestled among trees, large windows framing views of nature, a wraparound porch extending the living space outdoors. It's a cabin about an hour outside the city, I explained as Olivia and Mark examined the drawings. Nothing fancy, but structurally sound. James is going to renovate it himself, with some help from his colleagues. On the weekends, James added. It's a long-term project, not a quick flip. But your apartment is so beautiful, Olivia said, confusion creasing her brow. And you've always been a city person, sophomore, people change, I said simply. After everything that happened, we reevaluated what matters to us. Having space to breathe, to create, to live simply, that matters more than square footage or prestigious addresses. Plus, James added, the money we save on housing costs gives us more freedom to pursue work that's meaningful, not just lucrative. Mark nodded appreciatively, studying the sketches with a builder's eye. The bones look good. When do you close? Next month, I replied. We'll keep the apartment until the basic renovations are complete, then make the move gradually. We're calling it the reset, James said, a hint of pride in his voice. A physical manifestation of the changes we've been making internally. Olivia looked between us, her expression softening. You two seem different. Happier. We I acknowledged. Not because everything's perfect or easy, but because we're facing things together now. No more secrets, no more parallel lives. From suspected murder to dream home, she mused, shaking her head. Only you could turn paranoia into a life transformation, Sophie. We all laughed, the sound filling the small dining room with warmth. The evening continued with more wine, more stories, more plans shared between two couples who had found their own paths to happiness. Later, driving home under a canopy of stars, James reached across the console to take my hand. They seemed genuinely happy for us. I think they were surprised, I admitted. Especially Olivia. She's used to me chasing conventional success markers. Speaking of which, James said, squeezing my fingers lightly, have you decided about Richard's offer? I watched the city lights grow brighter as we approached, thinking about the choice before me. I'm going to accept it, I said finally. It's a risk, the program could fail, funding could be cut, but it feels right. It suits you, James affirmed. I've seen how you come alive when you're developing those workshops. The corporate stuff never lit you up that way. His observation, simple but profound, touched me deeply. He had seen what I couldn't, that I had been fitting myself into a role that constricted my natural gifts rather than amplifying them. What about you? I asked. Any regrets about leaving Landmark? James shook his head without hesitation. None. I was designing impressive buildings, but not places that mattered. The Chen house may be smaller in scale, but knowing a family will actually live better because of my design choices, that's real success. Back home, as we prepared for bed in the apartment that would soon no longer be ours, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 3 months. From the night of terror when I discovered James's searches to this evening of shared dreams and authentic connection. Penny for your thoughts, James said, catching my pensive expression. As I sat on the edge of the bed. I was just thinking about how differently this could have played out, I admitted. If I hadn't found your search history, or if you hadn't found mine. If we'd kept pretending everything was fine while growing further apart. James sat beside me, his shoulder pressing warmly against mine. Or if you'd just left that night, gone to Olivia's without confronting me. We could have lost everything, I said softly. Not just the material things, but us. The core of who we are together. Instead, we found something better than what we thought we wanted, he observed, his voice thoughtful. More authentic. More aligned with our true selves. I nodded, leaning against him slightly. It's strange how fear can be the doorway to courage. I was terrified that night, of losing you, of being betrayed, of violence. But facing that fear led us here, to this moment of new beginnings. From suspected murder to the reset, James summarized with a small smile. Quite a journey. And it's just beginning, I reminded him. The cabin will need months of work. The outreach program is still evolving. We're reinventing ourselves professionally and personally. I wouldn't have it any other way, James said, wrapping an arm around me. The security we thought we had was an illusion anyway. At least now we're choosing our path consciously. His words resonated deeply. The security we'd been chasing, prestigious jobs, expensive property, early retirement, had been a mirage that kept moving beyond our reach. And even if we'd caught it, would it have brought the fulfillment we now felt embarking on a less conventional journey? 2 weeks later, I stood in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees surrounding our future home. The cabin was smaller than it had appeared in photos, the clearing around it wilder. But as I walked the perimeter, I could feel the potential of the space, not just as a building, but as a refuge, a laboratory for the life we were consciously creating. James emerged from inside, tool belt slung low on his hips, a smudge of dust across his forehead. Well? What do you think now that you've seen it in person? It needs work, I acknowledged with a laugh. A lot of work. But, he prompted, seeing more in my expression. But it feels right, I finished. Like we're exactly where we're supposed to be. He crossed to me, work gloves tucked into his back pocket. Even though it's a fraction of the size of the lakeside estate's houses you were browsing 3 months ago? Especially because of that, I said firmly. Those houses were never about what we needed. They were about proving something, to ourselves, to others. This place is about creating space for what actually matters. James nodded, understanding without further explanation. We'd spent hours completing the "What Matters Now" document together, transforming it from my initial scattered thoughts into a shared vision. Not a rigid plan, but a compass to guide our decisions. More natural light. Less commuting time. Space to write. Room to design. Meals shared around a table, not eaten hastily between meetings. Work that enriches rather than depletes. Possessions. Chosen with intention, not accumulated by habit. The foundation is solid, James reported, returning to practical matters. And the roof is newer than we thought. The biggest issues are the electrical system and the kitchen. One step at a time, I reminded him, our new mantra for approaching challenges. We don't have to fix everything at once. He smiled, recognition in his eyes. Says the woman who used to create 15-point plans for weekend projects. I'm evolving, I said with a laugh. Slowly. As we walked the property together, discussing possible garden locations and where morning light would be strongest, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Still can't believe you're becoming a country mouse. Dinner next week before you disappear into the wilderness? I smiled, typing back, it's an hour away, not another planet. But yes to dinner. We'll bring cabin photos. James peered over my shoulder. Country mouse, huh? If only she knew you've already ordered 3 books on vegetable gardening. Don't tell her, I warned playfully. I have a city girl reputation to maintain. Your secret's safe with me, he promised, then grew more serious. All joking aside, are you sure about this, Sophie? It's a big change from everything you've known. I considered the question honestly, looking around at the trees swaying gently in the spring breeze, the dappled light playing across the forest floor, the small cabin waiting for our vision to transform it. I'm sure about the direction, I said finally. The details will evolve as we go. But this path feels authentic in a way our previous one never did, even when we were succeeding at it. James nodded, understanding exactly what I meant. From life insurance searches to life redesign, he mused. Not the transformation either of us expected. Life rarely follows the path we plan, I observed. The question is whether we have the courage to adjust the map when we discover new terrain. He took my hand, his palm warm and solid against mine. Or when we realize we've been reading the wrong map entirely. As we continued exploring our future home, pointing out possibilities to each other with increasing excitement, I thought about the night that had catalyzed this journey. The terror, the mistrust, the near disaster of assumptions unquestioned. We could have lost everything that night, our marriage, our trust, our shared future. Instead, we had found something precious, the courage to question not just each other, but the very foundations of the lives we had been building. From suspected murder to authentic living. From divorce attorneys to true partnership. From fear to possibility. Not a straight path, but a winding one that had led us, unexpectedly, exactly where we needed to be. Later that evening, sitting on the cabin's porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, I leaned against James's shoulder. What are you thinking? He asked, wrapping an arm around me as the air cooled with approaching night. That sometimes the worst moments contain the seeds of the best ones, I replied. If I hadn't been suspicious enough to check your search history. And if I hadn't been nosy enough to look at yours, he added with a smile. We might never have had the conversation that saved us, I finished. Might never have found our way here. James was quiet for a moment, contemplative. Do you think people have to reach a breaking point before they can truly change? Or can they choose transformation before crisis forces their hand? The question resonated, echoing questions I'd been asking myself. I think transformation is always available, I said slowly. But comfortable inertia is powerful. Sometimes it takes a shock to break its hold. He nodded against my hair. Our shock came in the form of misinterpreted search histories. But the real revelation wasn't about life insurance or divorce attorneys. It was about honesty, I continued his thought. About trusting each other with our full selves, failures, doubts, dreams, and all. And about questioning whether the path we were on was taking us where we actually wanted to go, James added, or just where we thought we should want to go. As darkness settled around us, stars appearing one by one in the clearing above the cabin, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved or perfect, but because we were facing life's complexities together, with open eyes and aligned hearts. The journey ahead would contain challenges, financial adjustments, career evolutions, the physical labor of transforming this simple structure into our home. But they were challenges we had chosen consciously, not circumstances we were merely reacting to. We should head back to the city, James said eventually, though I could hear the reluctance in his voice. Early meetings tomorrow. Just a few. More minutes, I requested, not ready to leave this moment of clarity and connection. The stars are just getting good. He settled back without protest, his presence warm and solid beside me. In comfortable silence, we watched the night sky deepen, more stars appearing with each passing minute. Tomorrow would bring its own demands and decisions. But tonight, in this peaceful moment between what had been and what would be, I was exactly where I needed to be, beside the man I had once feared, now my truest ally in creating a life of meaning and purpose. From suspected murder to stars shared in silence. From paranoia to peace. From separate lives to a journey truly shared. Not the path either of us had planned, but infinitely more valuable than the one we'd abandoned. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of our cabin, morning light streaming through windows that James had expanded during the renovation. Steam rose from my coffee mug as I gazed out at the garden, now thriving with late summer vegetables and flowers. The transformation of this space, from neglected structure to vibrant home, mirrored the internal transformation we'd undergone. Since that fateful night when search histories revealed our deepest fears and unspoken truths. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from my reflection. Olivia's car appeared around the bend in our driveway, kicking up dust that glowed golden in the early light. I smiled, anticipating her reaction to the changes since her last visit 3 months ago. The deck was finally finished, the garden in full bloom, and James had completed the built-in bookshelves that now housed our carefully curated collection, no longer keeping books we should read, only those that sparked genuine interest or joy. "Look at you," Olivia called as she emerged from her car, sunglasses pushed into her hair. "The country life agrees with you." I laughed, stepping onto the porch to greet her. City girl turned gardener. Who would have thought? My sister embraced me warmly, then held me at arm's length, studying my face. "You look happy, sophomore, really happy." "I am," I said simply, because it was true in a way that required no elaboration. We moved inside, Olivia exclaiming over the completed kitchen renovation, concrete countertops James had poured himself, open shelving displaying only our most used dishes, the vintage stove I'd found at a salvage yard and restored with YouTube tutorials. "I can't believe this is the same place," she marveled, running her hand along the smooth counter edge. "Remember when I first visited? There were squirrels living in the walls. And now they're respectfully relegated to the trees where they belong," I confirmed with a smile. "Coffee?" As I poured her a cup, Olivia settled at our dining table, a farm table built by James from reclaimed barn wood, marked with the honest imperfections of use and history. "Where's James?" she asked, accepting the steaming mug. "Meeting with clients at the Chun house. The family he designed for last year referred their parents, who want to age in place but need modifications to make it possible." Pride colored my voice as I spoke of my husband's growing reputation for thoughtful, human-centered design. "And the teaching program? Still going well?" "Better than well," I said, joining her at the table. "We've expanded to 15 schools now, and the curriculum is being adopted by a community college system in the neighboring state." Olivia shook her head slightly, wonderment in her expression. "When I think about where you were a year ago, checking your husband's search history for murder plots, contemplating divorce attorneys." "Life takes unexpected turns," I acknowledged with a small laugh. "That's putting it mildly. You went from corporate climbing to educational innovation, from luxury apartment hunting to..." She gestured around the cabin. "Whatever you call this rustic chic transformation. We call it right-sizing," I said. "Aligning our environment with our values instead of someone else's expectations." Olivia sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "That's why I'm here, actually. I wanted to talk to you about something." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her suddenly serious tone. "Everything okay with you and Mark?" "Everything's great with us," she assured me quickly. "But I've been thinking a lot about your journey. About how a crisis became a catalyst for positive change." "And?" I prompted when she hesitated. "And I've been feeling stuck," she admitted. "Not unhappy, just stagnant. Like I'm living according to a script I didn't consciously choose." Her words resonated deeply, echoing thoughts I'd had during those early days of our transformation. "What kind of script?" "The conventional one. Good job, nice house, vacations twice a year, retirement at 65 if we're lucky." She sighed, staring into her coffee. "It looks good on paper, but lately I've been wondering if there's more. If we're missing something essential by following the well-marked path." I considered her words carefully, recognizing the yearning beneath them. Having a conventional life isn't inherently wrong, I said gently. The question is whether it's conventional by choice or by default. That's just it, Olivia leaned forward earnestly. I don't think Mark and I have ever really chosen. We've just been following the expected progression without questioning it. What would you choose if you were truly deciding consciously? I asked, echoing the question that had guided our own transformation. That's why I'm here, she said. To understand how you figured that out. How you went from suspecting James of planning your murder to building this. She gestured around the sun-dappled kitchen, this intentional life together. I smiled at her characterization. It wasn't a straight line, that's for sure. Tell me, she urged. Not the glossed-over version you share at family gatherings. The real process. How did you move from crisis to clarity? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. The journey from that night of fear to this morning of peace contained more twists and setbacks than could be easily summarized. But perhaps our story could offer something valuable to my sister as she contemplated her own path. It started with honesty, I began. Painful, uncomfortable honesty about what wasn't working and why. Not just between James and me, but within ourselves. Olivia nodded encouragingly. The night you confronted him about the life insurance searches. That was the catalyst, I confirmed. But the real transformation began the next morning, when we both acknowledged that we'd been living inauthentic lives. James pretending he still had a prestigious job, me pretending I was fulfilled by corporate success. The masks we wear, Olivia murmured. Exactly. We realized we'd been performing versions of ourselves we thought we should be, rather than exploring who we actually were beneath those expectations. I rose to refill our coffee cups, gathering my thoughts. The document I mentioned before, What Matters Now, that became our compass. We started by asking what brought us genuine joy and meaning, not just accomplishment or status. And what did you discover? Olivia asked. That many of the things we thought we wanted, the big house, the prestigious address, the impressive job titles, were actually sources of pressure rather than pleasure. I smiled ruefully. And that many of the things that brought us real joy were simple, meaningful work, time together, connection with nature, creating with our hands. That sounds so straightforward when you put it that way, Olivia observed. The principles were simple, I acknowledged. The implementation was messy and complicated. We had financial realities to face, family expectations to manage, our own ingrained patterns to overcome. Like what? Like my need to impress others with achievement, I admitted. Or James's reluctance to ask for help when he needed it. Patterns that had nearly destroyed our marriage before we recognized them. I described the gradual process of aligning our external lives with our internal values, the decision to downsize, the careful financial planning that had made it possible, the hours of conversation about what we truly wanted versus what we'd been conditioned to pursue. It wasn't always smooth, I emphasized, wanting to give her the unvarnished truth. We argued about priorities, backslid into old patterns, questioned our decisions when things got difficult. What kept you going through those moments? Olivia asked. I considered the question carefully. The clarity we'd found in those first honest conversations. Once we'd acknowledged the gap between the lives we were living and the lives we actually wanted, we couldn't unsee it. Going back to comfortable inauthenticity wasn't an option anymore. Olivia nodded slowly, absorbing this. So how do Mark and I find that clarity without a dramatic crisis to force the issue? I don't think checking his search history for murder plots would yield the same results. I laughed, appreciating her humor. Probably not recommended. But you don't need a crisis to ask the essential questions. What matters to you now, not 5 years ago, not in some hypothetical future, but right now? What energizes you versus what depletes you? If you could design your life from scratch, without reference to expectations or shoulds, what would it look like? Those are big questions, Olivia said, a hint of trepidation in her voice. They are, I agreed. And the answers aren't static. What matters to us has evolved even over this past year. The point isn't to find the perfect answers once and for all, but to keep asking the questions rather than defaulting to autopilot. The conversation continued as we moved to the porch, settling into the Adirondack chairs James had built last winter. I shared more details of our journey, the practical steps we'd taken, the resources that had guided us, the mistakes we'd made and lessons we'd learned. The hardest part, I confessed, was letting go of other people's definitions of success. Even now, there are moments when I see former colleagues' social media posts about promotions or luxury vacations, and that old programming kicks in. The sense that I should want those things, that I'm somehow falling behind by choosing differently. How do you handle that? Olivia asked. I come back to the present moment, I said simply. To the evidence of the life we've consciously created. The satisfaction I feel teaching students who light up when they master a new concept. The peace of this place. The authenticity of my partnership with James now that we're not hiding from each other. As if summoned by his name, I heard James's truck approaching. Moments later, he appeared around the bend, parking beside Olivia's car. He waved when he spotted us on the porch, his face breaking into a genuine smile that still made my heart skip after all these years. The Chens send their regards, he called as he climbed the steps to join us. And Mrs. Chen Sr. commissioned preliminary drawings for aging-in-place modifications. That's wonderful, I said, making room for him to perch on the arm of my chair. Olivia and I were just discussing our journey this past year. From suspected murder to minimalist living, he quipped, wrapping an arm casually around my shoulders. Quite the plot twist. Olivia laughed. I was asking Sophie how you two found clarity about what you really wanted, versus what you thought you were supposed to want. James nodded thoughtfully. It wasn't a single moment of enlightenment. More like a series of honest conversations that kept building on each other. And a lot of trial and error, I added. Remember the month we tried to become morning people? Because some productivity guru said it was the key to success? For 30 a.m. alarms, James groaned dramatically. Never again. The point is, I continued, turning back to Olivia, we gave ourselves permission to experiment, to try different approaches and see what actually worked for us, not what worked in theory or for someone else. That's what I'm missing, Olivia said, clarity dawning in her expression. Permission to experiment with my life instead of just optimizing the path I'm already on. Exactly, James agreed. The question isn't, how can I do better at the life I have? But, is this the life I actually want? The conversation continued through lunch, a simple meal of salad harvested from our garden and bread James had baked the previous day. We sat around the farm table, sunlight shifting across the wooden surface as hours passed, exploring questions of purpose, authenticity, and conscious choice. When Olivia finally prepared to leave, her expression was lighter, her eyes bright with possibility. Thank you, she said, embracing me warmly. For showing me that transformation doesn't require a dramatic crisis, just the courage to question the default settings. Keep me posted, I urged. And remember, there's no single right answer. Only the answer that's right for you and Mark. After her car disappeared down the gravel drive, James and I returned to the porch, settling side by side as afternoon light gilded the trees surrounding our clearing. Do you think they'll make changes? James asked, his fingers interlaced with mine. I think they'll start asking questions, I replied. The changes will follow naturally once they see the gaps between their current reality and what they truly want. Just like us, he observed. Just like us, I agreed, thinking of the long, sometimes difficult journey from that night of fear and suspicion to this afternoon of peace and purpose. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching goldfinches dart among the sunflowers we'd planted at the edge of the clearing. Eventually, James spoke again, his voice contemplative. It's strange to think that a year ago, you genuinely believed I might be planning to kill you for insurance money. I laughed softly at the absurdity of it now. And you thought I was secretly planning to divorce you. We were both right, in a way, he mused. Something was dying between us. The pretense. The performance. The people we thought we had to be. And something else was being born, I added. Though we couldn't see it then. Do you ever miss it? He asked. The old life? The status, the trajectory, the certainty of the path ahead? I considered the question honestly, as was our practice now. I miss aspects of it sometimes. The convenience of city living. The clear markers of progress and success. But? He prompted, knowing there was more. But I don't miss the constant striving, I said. The sense that nothing was ever enough, not the job title, not the salary, not the apartment. I don't miss performing a version of success that never quite fit me. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.